The slam of the guest room door was a physical blow, a concussive force that vibrated through the old floorboards and up into the marrow of my bones. But it was her words, hissed through the wood just before the latch clicked, that truly shattered the air. "You're just a guest here, Genevieve. You'd better remember that." I remained seated in the living room, in the worn armchair where my late husband Richard had read the paper every Sunday for 30 years. My hands, which had once confidently assisted in open-heart surgeries, lay folded in my lap, suddenly feeling ancient and useless. The weight of a lifetime of night shifts at the hospital, of raising a son, of whispered prayers by Richard's bedside as cancer stole him, piece by piece, seemed to settle deeper into the cushions beneath me. 2 years ago, after Richard passed, the silence of our sprawling Portland home became an unbearable roar. So I sold it. I packed what mattered into my old sedan and drove south to the suburbs, where my son Leo and his wife Chloe were navigating life with their second child, a little girl who still smelled of milk and fresh beginnings. I thought living with family would be a sanctuary. I thought helping with my grandchildren, sharing my pension to ease their burdens, and filling their home with the smell of fresh bread would be a balm for the wound in my own heart. I never imagined I would become an intruder in a life I was actively funding. I never expected to be designated a mere guest. From the moment I arrived, I insisted on paying my way. I was a retired surgical nurse with a solid pension and the lifelong habit of anticipating needs before they became crises. I covered the groceries, the ever-climbing utility bills, the surprise medical copays for the kids. When Chloe lamented the cost of a good preschool, I quietly set up the payments. When the Oregon winters grew bleak and damp, I absorbed the spike in the heating bill without a word. I asked for nothing in return. I believe that's how family operated. You give, you support, you love without keeping a ledger. At first, it was everything I'd hoped for. I was Nana, the keeper of stories and the baker of perfect chocolate chip cookies. My grandchildren's faces would light up when I walked into a room. Leo still called me Mom, his voice holding the same warmth it had since he was a boy. Chloe offered polite, if somewhat distant smiles, but warmth, I've learned, can recede as surely as the tide, leaving behind a cold and rocky shore. The politeness began to fray, replaced by comments that stung like paper cuts. "Genevieve, you left the garage door open again?" Chloe would say, her tone sharp enough to curdle milk. I would murmur an apology and retreat. One day I found the collection of family photos I'd brought, pictures of Leo as a child, of Richard and me on our wedding day, relocated from the main bookshelf to a small, dusty corner table with a sticky note that read, "Mom's Things." The exclusion became more organized. I was quietly removed from the family group chat, where meal plans and weekend outings were discussed. They hired a weekly cleaning service, politely declining my offers to help, making me feel both useless and like a part of the mess that needed managing. Last month, as I was serving the cinnamon rolls I'd woken at dawn to bake, Chloe flashed a smile that was all teeth. "You know, Genevieve, we were thinking, since your stay was only meant to be temporary, we really need this guest room for storage or maybe my yoga space." I didn't respond. I simply cleared my plate and walked to the kitchen, the silence of my footsteps a roar in my own ears. Then came this morning. I was in the kitchen, slicing strawberries for the children's oatmeal, a simple, happy routine. Their voices carried from the hallway. I didn't mean to listen, but Chloe's voice was a scalpel. "You're lucky we let you live here," she'd hissed at Leo. "You don't get a say under our roof." The words weren't meant for me, but they struck me all the same. You don't get to say. The foundation of my world, the one I thought was built on love and contribution, cracked beneath my feet. I carried the oatmeal to the dining table. My grandchildren smiled, their pure, uncomplicated smiles. To them, I still belonged. But as Leo entered the room, his eyes wouldn't meet mine. He was filled with a familiar spineless guilt that vanished the moment Chloe entered behind him, her posture rigid, her phone held like a shield. "I'm sorry, Mom," he started to mumble. Chloe cut him off. Let's just drop it. She'll get over it." And with that, I was dismissed. Not a mother, not a grandmother, but an it, a problem to be managed, a guest whose welcome had long since expired. I sat in my armchair, the house silent now that they had left. The tears I'd been holding back for months threatened to fall, but I refused them. Anger wasn't the answer. Truth was, I thought of Richard, of the life we built on mutual respect. I thought of the down payment I had given them for this very house, a gift from his father's life insurance pool. They ruled a house they didn't truly own, treating its quiet benefactor like a liability. I rose from the chair, the old springs groaning in protest. I patted its arm once, a silent thank you for its steadfast support. As I stood there, a plan began to form, cold and clear as ice. Her door was closed, but her words hung in the air. I made a silent promise to myself. I would remind them in no uncertain terms who was the guest and who was the host. I began my days before the sun, as I always had. In the pre-dawn quiet, I could pretend the house was mine again. I'd slip into the kitchen, tying on an old apron, and begin the rituals of care. I chopped vegetables for stews, measured flour for bread, and set the coffee to brew, filling the house with aromas of home and stability. I did it because it was my purpose, or so I had told myself. I'd guide the children through their morning routines, helping my grandson with his shoelaces and braiding my granddaughter's hair. Their innocent affection was a balm, a temporary reprieve from the chilling reality of my situation. At the breakfast table, an invisible line was drawn. I sat at the far end, an island. My questions to Leo and Chloe were met with clipped, one-word answers. Their eyes would flicker toward me, Leo's with a hint of shame, Chloe's with unconcealed irritation. I ate my food, tasting nothing but the bitterness of being tolerated. I was becoming wallpaper in the home I kept solvent. As I washed the dishes after they'd all rushed out, I remembered the day I'd made the offer. Leo had been lamenting their finances, the impossible cost of daycare, the mortgage that felt like a millstone. I saw the fear in his eyes, the same fear that I'd seen in my own father's eyes decades ago. "Let me help," I'd said softly. "Let me set up an account to cover the household bills, preschool, utilities, groceries. Think of it as a gift from Richard. He would have wanted you to be secure." Leo had nodded, relief washing over his face. Chloe had looked skeptical, her eyes narrowing as if searching for the catch. There was no catch, only a mother's desire to see her child safe. I created the Atherton Family Trust. My monthly pension checks and significant dividends from Richard's investment portfolio were deposited directly into it, and from that trust, I alone authorized automatic monthly transfers to a debit account. It was this debit card that Chloe used for everything: organic groceries from New Seasons Market, tuition for the Montessori school, her artisanal pottery classes, Leo's craft beer club. They lived a life of comfortable, curated ease, entirely unaware of the silent, invisible architecture holding it all up. The account was in my name, and I was the sole trustee. The statements, which I kept locked in my desk, were a quiet testament to my love. They showed a steady, one-way flow of support, but I was beginning to realize that unacknowledged generosity is often misunderstood for obligation and, eventually, for entitlement. One afternoon, I overheard Chloe on the phone with a friend. "Oh, Leo's mom. She's just here because she has nowhere else to go. It's a lot, but what can you do?" My hands, folding a load of their laundry, began to shake. I wasn't a refuge, I was a resource. That night, I made the mistake of trying to participate. They were discussing summer camps for the kids. The brochure for the arts camp looked lovely, I offered. I'd be happy to cover the fees for that as well. Chloe didn't even look up from her iPad. "We've got it covered. You don't get a vote on this, Genevieve. You don't get a vote." The words were a judge's gavel. I, who funded their lives, had no vote. I wanted to say, "I paid for the very roof that gives you shelter," to be so dismissive, but I said nothing. I sipped my tea, the hot liquid a punishment on my tongue, and blinked back the angry tears. The labeling began suddenly. A carton of almond milk in the fridge had Chloe written on it in sharp black ink. Then a package of expensive cheese was marked for guests only.
which I understood with a painful lurch, meant not for Genevieve. The message was clear. They were drawing a line.
Partitioning a home that was once shared. The final blow came when Chloe approached me with a practiced, bright smile. "Hey G, I was thinking to make things easier and fairer for everyone, we should probably all start buying our own separate groceries. Since we all have different budgets and tastes." "To be fair?" I repeated the words, feeling like ash in my mouth. My budget was funding their entire pantry, but I simply nodded. I started keeping a small bag of my own food in my room, like a college student in a dorm. With every separately purchased apple, with every carton of milk I labeled with my own initial, I felt a piece of myself being carved away. Then came the new text thread, the one I wasn't in. I found out by accident when I asked Leo about soccer practice. "Oh, didn't you see the message?" he asked before his face fell. "Ah, right. We made a new chat just for the three of us. It's easier for scheduling." I was no longer on the family calendar. I was an administrative inconvenience. I started eating my lonely dinners in the armchair, unable to bear the weight of their polite, exclusionary silence at the dining table. The final insult came on a chilly afternoon when I forgot to close the garage door after bringing in my single bag of groceries. Chloe stormed into the house, her face a mask of fury. "Do you realize the garage was wide open all day? Are you trying to get us robbed? You forget things, you slow us down, you crowd our space." I opened my mouth to apologize, but she held up a hand, not to strike, but to silence. "You are just a guest here," she spat the words. "A final verdict, not family." I didn't argue. I didn't cry. I walked to the living room and sat down, staring at the family portrait on the mantel, the one where I stood behind them, a proud matriarch. I looked at my own smiling face in the frame and realized I hadn't seen that woman in the mirror for a very long time. I sat there until the house grew dark and silent, and I thought, not for the first time, about the Atherton Family Trust. I had never wanted to use it as a weapon, but when you are repeatedly treated like a ghost, perhaps the only way to prove you exist is to remind everyone what happens when you disappear. The next morning, I spread the trust account documents across the small desk in my room. They felt like a battlefield map. I had kept everything. Every deposit slip, every transfer authorization, every letter from the financial firm. Richard had always said that meticulous records were a form of power, and I had listened. I found the folder, thick with the weight of my silent contributions. The latest statement showed the rhythm of their life paid for by me. $2,500 for the mortgage, $800 for preschool, hundreds at Whole Foods, a charge at a boutique children's clothing store. Every withdrawal was from the debit account linked to the trust, an account that only I, Genevieve Atherton, could control. I thought about the day I'd set it up. Leo had just been laid off, and Chloe was overwhelmed with a newborn. I saw their panic. I called my financial advisor, a kind, discreet man named Mr. Davies. I explained I wanted to create a revocable living trust, one that I could fund and control completely while I was alive. It was an act of love, designed to provide a safety net, not a golden hammock. They had never questioned the source of the funds. They had simply accepted. They assumed it was a slow bleed from my savings, the generosity of a doting, slightly dotty old woman. They never suspected a system. They never suspected I was still the sharp, methodical woman who had run a high-stakes surgical theater for 3 decades. I picked up my phone and dialed Mr. Davies. "Genevieve," he said warmly, "a pleasure to hear from you. What can I do for you today?" My voice was steady, my heart a calm, rhythmic drum. "Mr. Davies, I'm calling to confirm the status of the Atherton Family Trust. I remain the sole trustee, correct? With absolute control over all assets and disbursements?" "Absolutely, Genevieve," he replied without a moment's hesitation. "You and you alone have full authority. The account is entirely at your discretion." I took a breath. "And if I wish to freeze the account effective immediately?" There was a brief pause on the other end of the line. "Then it freezes," he said, his voice gentle but firm. "All automatic transfers would cease, the debit card would be declined, they would have no access to the funds." I looked at the statement again. A charge for a family trip to the Oregon Zoo, a payment for Chloe's yoga teacher training,
All things I had provided, all things taken for granted. I pictured the scene at the grocery store checkout. The card declined, Chloe's flush of embarrassment turning to indignant anger, Leo's confused fumbling. In that moment, I felt not a shred of malice. I felt only a profound, liberating clarity. They had taught me that my love was transactional. It was time for a transaction to be completed. Please freeze the account, Mr. Davies, I said. Consider it done. Genevieve, just like that, the invisible architecture of their life was dismantled. I told no one. I went about my day, smiling that quiet smile of a woman who holds a secret. I baked one last batch of lemon poppy seed muffins for the children, a final gesture of the grandmother they thought they could discard. I left them on the counter with a note. Enjoy, my darlings. Love, Nana. Then I went to my room and packed. I didn't rage. I didn't weep. I simply hummed with the silent power they never knew I possessed. I had given them comfort. I had given them security. Now I was taking back something far more valuable than money. I was taking back myself. I left before dawn, a single suitcase by my side. On the polished dining room table where I was no longer welcome, I left a simple, handwritten note, folded in half. Thank you for reminding me who I am. I slipped the house key through the mail slot and got into the waiting taxi without a backward glance. The driver asked if I needed help with my bag. I smiled. No, thank you. It's surprisingly light. 2 hours later, I was unlocking the door to a small, sunlit apartment in Cannon Beach overlooking the majestic Haystack Rock. It was a place I had quietly purchased 5 years prior, a just-in-case plan born of Richard's cautious wisdom. The apartment smelled of sea salt and clean, empty space. It was not lonely, it was peaceful. I opened the windows and let the ocean breeze sweep through the silence. Here was different. It was a presence, not an absence. It was mine. My phone remained off for 3 days. When I finally turned it on, the flood came. Texts from Leo. Mom, the card isn't working. Is something wrong with the account? Then the school called. Tuition bounced. Please call me. Then from Chloe, dripping with indignation. Is this some kind of sick joke? Genevieve? The power company sent a shut-off notice. I read them all and deleted them. I had nothing left to say that they were willing to hear. I was, as she had so helpfully reminded me, just a guest, and guests are not responsible for household emergencies. Guests do not carry the burdens of the hosts, but I had never been a guest. I had been the foundation, and when the foundation walks away, the house is bound to tremble. A week after I left, they received a formal letter from the bank. A week after that, a notice of default on the mortgage I had been paying. From what a friend in their neighborhood told me, the curated life unraveled with shocking speed. Chloe, unable to afford childcare, had to quit her part-time job at an art gallery. Leo was working double shifts at a warehouse, his hands once soft from an office job now blistered and raw. The neighbors said she saw Chloe in the driveway one afternoon, screaming into her phone. A portrait of a woman whose reality had suddenly been presented with a bill. The house that once smelled of roasted chicken and fresh laundry now sat cold. One rainy afternoon, a final voicemail came through. It was her. Her voice was thin, stripped of her usual confidence. Genevieve, I know we were unfair. It's been so hard. The kids need stability. Can we please just talk? I listened to it twice, her plea for the stability she had so carelessly shattered. Then I deleted it. It wasn't her words that kept the house warm. It wasn't her effort that paid for the children's shoes. It was mine. She thought I was a guest, but I had been the host all along, and the party was over. My mornings now belong to me. I sip my Earl Grey tea and watch the mist burn off the Pacific. I joined a book club filled with women whose stories, in their own ways, echo my own. Women who gave until they were transparent, only to find themselves looked straight through. We call ourselves the Cannon Beach Restoration Society. We restore books, furniture, and each other's spirits. We talk about deeds and wills, about the importance of keeping your name on your own life. We don't hate our children. That would be too simple. We simply refuse to rescue them from the consequences of their own choices anymore. Motherhood taught me to hold on tight. but wisdom taught me the power of letting go.
O might hear this story, the caregivers and the quiet cornerstones of families. Do not let them turn you into a guest in the home your labor has built. Do not let their comfort become your cage. Keep your name on your dignity. When they start calling you difficult, it is often because you have stopped being convenient. And when they forget who held them up, remind them, not with anger, but with the deafening silence of your absence. I gave them stability, they gave me exile. So I gave them what they truly wanted all along, a life without me. And in the process, I found my own. It is a life full of salty air, good books, and the brilliant, unapologetic light of my own company. And it was worth waiting for.